The barking echoed up the stone shaft, desperate and fading, 50 feet below, in the murky water of the abandoned well. The German shepherd's front leg trembled violently beneath the weight of the small boy balanced upon it. Blood from the dog's reopened wound swirled crimson in the rising water. "Stay awake, Maverick," 7-year-old Ethan whispered, his lips blue from cold. "Someone will find us." The dog's amber eyes, once celebrated across 3 counties for their keen intelligence, now clouded with pain. Still, he didn't move. Wouldn't move, not while the boy needed him. Above, the perfect circle of blue sky seemed impossibly distant. "Listen." A woman's voice carried down the shaft. "There's something down there." A flashlight beam pierced the darkness. "Oh my God," the voice gasped. "There's a boy and a dog down there." The local news would later call it impossible. A miracle. How a dog deemed useless became the most important creature in the world. Leave a like and share your thoughts in the comments along with the city you're watching from now. Let's continue with the story. Maverick hadn't always been a stray. For 6 glorious years, he'd been the crown jewel of the Southwest Search and Rescue Team. His name synonymous with heroism after the devastating Mesa earthquake of 2019. 14 lives saved by one dog's extraordinary sense of smell and unwavering courage. The newspapers had called him the 4-legged angel of Mesa. His handler, Captain Brian Miller, had accepted medals on his behalf, smiling for the cameras while Maverick sat at attention. The perfect rescue dog. Until the accident. The Sullivan building collapse should have been a routine search, a partially damaged structure. Reports of a trapped maintenance worker. Maverick had found the man within minutes, guiding rescuers through the unstable corridors. They were almost clear when the secondary collapse happened. Maverick pushed the worker forward, out of danger. As tons of concrete shifted, his front leg was crushed in an instant. 3 surgeries later, with a titanium plate and 6 screws holding the limb together, the department's decision came down. Maverick was now a liability. Useless for rescue work, they'd written in his file. Captain Miller had surrendered him to the Carson City shelter without ceremony, already talking about the new, younger shepherd he'd been promised. "Got a baby on the way," he'd told the shelter worker. No time for a crippled dog. Maverick had escaped during transport to a specialized rescue, disappearing into the desert landscape until he'd limped into Pinewood Creek 3 months later, a shadow of his former self. 7-year-old Ethan Miller watched the stray German shepherd from his foster home's window each morning. Unlike the other children who feared the large, scarred animal, Ethan saw something familiar in those amber eyes, something broken, but not defeated. The boy understood broken things. His parents had disappeared in the Superstition Mountains 3 years ago, their camp found abandoned, no bodies ever recovered. Since then, he'd bounced between 4 foster homes, currently landing with the elderly Winters couple who made no secret that their care was temporary. "He ain't nothing but trouble, boy," said Mrs. Winters, catching him staring at the dog again. "Stay away from that beast, probably riddled with disease." But Ethan had learned early that adults often feared what they didn't understand, and he understood the limping shepherd better than anyone in Pinewood Creek could possibly know. The first time Ethan approached Maverick, the dog growled a deep, rumbling warning that would have sent most children running. Ethan simply sat down on the dirt, 10 feet away, and unwrapped half his peanut butter sandwich. "I'm not scared of you," he said quietly, placing the sandwich half on the ground between them. "My name's Ethan. You look hungry." 3 minutes passed in silent standoff before the dog limped forward, snatched the food, and retreated to a safe distance. Progress. Ethan decided. The next day, he tried again. And the day after that. By the end of the week, Maverick was taking food directly from his hand, though the dog still wouldn't allow himself to be touched. Mrs. Winters caught him on the 10th day, her weathered face pinched with disapproval as she watched from the kitchen window. "Ethan Miller, get away from that filthy animal this instant." She marched across the yard, waving her dish towel. Maverick vanished into the scrubby undergrowth at the property's edge with surprising speed for an animal with 3 good legs. "What did I tell you about that stray?" Mrs. Winters demanded, her voice sharp but her eyes concerned. "He could have rabies, parasites, Lord knows what else." "He's not sick," Ethan protested. "He's just hurt and hungry." "And how would you know that? Are you a veterinarian now?" Mrs. Winters sighed, her tone softening as she looked down at Ethan's determined face. "Look, I understand you feel sorry for it, but that dog belonged to somebody once. They threw him away for a reason, like my parents threw me away." The words slipped out before Ethan could stop them. Mrs. Winters' expression crumpled. "Oh, honey, your parents didn't throw you away. They had an accident. They loved you very much." But Ethan had turned away, his small shoulders rigid with the effort of containing his emotions. Mrs. Winters reached toward him, then let her hand fall. "Dinner's at 6, she said finally. "Wash up before you come in." That evening, Mr. Winters mentioned casually over pot roast that he'd seen animal control in town earlier. "Looking for strays," he said, not meeting Ethan's eyes. "Apparently there have been complaints." Ethan pushed his plate away, stomach knotting with anxiety. "May I be excused?" Later, hidden behind the maple tree at the edge of the Winters property, Ethan waited with a chicken leg stolen from the refrigerator in a plastic bowl filled with water. "They want to take you away," he whispered when Maverick appeared, moving with his characteristic caution through the lengthening shadows. "But I won't let them." The dog accepted the offering, then surprised Ethan by settling down beside him, close enough that the boy could feel the warmth radiating from his large body. "You're not useless," Ethan told him, daring to gently touch the scarred leg. Maverick tensed, but didn't move away. "You're just different now." As twilight deepened into night, boy and dog sat in companionable silence, 2 broken souls finding momentary peace in each other's presence. Every afternoon that week, Ethan rushed through his homework to spend time with Maverick behind the maple tree. The dog grew more comfortable, eventually allowing Ethan to stroke his head and examine the extensive scarring on his front leg. "That must have hurt real bad," Ethan said, tracing the ridge of scar tissue. "But you're still here, still fighting?" Maverick responded by resting his head on Ethan's knee, a gesture of trust that brought unexpected tears to the boy's eyes. On Friday, Ethan overheard Mrs. Winters on the phone, her voice hushed but clear through the thin walls of the old farmhouse. "Yes, we understand it's a good placement," she was saying. "The Petersons sound like lovely people. Of course, we've always known this was temporary." "Yes, end of the month works fine." Ethan's heart sank. Another move, another family. Another chance to be sent back when they realized he wasn't what they wanted. That evening, he told Maverick everything. "They're sending me to another family," he confided, burying his face in the dog's thick fur. "In Phoenix. That's really far away." Maverick listened with the perfect attention only animals can give, his amber eyes fixed on Ethan's face. "I wish I could take you with me," Ethan continued. "But they probably won't want a dog, especially not one with—" He trailed off, gesturing at Maverick's injured leg. The dog nudged his hand gently, as if in understanding. The following morning, Pinewood Creek buzzed with preparation for the annual Harvest Festival. Mrs. Winters enlisted Ethan to help carry her prize-winning pies to the community center. "The Petersons might come tomorrow," she mentioned casually as they loaded the car, "to meet you before the formal placement. They have a daughter about your age." Ethan nodded mechanically, his mind already calculating how to sneak away and find Maverick during the festival. "They live in a nice neighborhood," Mrs. Winters continued. "Good schools, swimming pool in the backyard." "Sounds great," Ethan murmured, not meeting her eyes. Mrs. Winters studied him for a moment, then sighed. "It's for the best. Ethan, Henry and I. We're too old to offer a permanent placement. You deserve a real family." The boy remained silent, staring out the window as Pinewood Creek's modest building slid past. A real family, as if such a thing existed anymore. At the festival grounds, colorful booths lined the town square. The air smelled of cotton candy and barbecue smoke. Under different circumstances, Ethan might have been excited by the carnival games and pony rides. "Stay where I can see you," Mrs. Winters instructed as she arranged her pies on the judging table. "The twins are with Mr. Winters at the cornhole tournament if you want to find them." Ethan nodded obediently, but his eyes were already scanning the festival's edges for any sign of Maverick. Last year, the dog would have been here officially, part of the search and rescue demonstration that always drew crowds. Now, he would be lurking at the margins, drawn by the smells of food but wary of people. As Mrs. Winters became engrossed in pie crust discussions with the other contestants, Ethan slipped away, 2 hot dogs wrapped in napkins tucked securely in his pocket. The Pinewood Creek Harvest Festival transformed the sleepy town for one weekend each September. Booths lined the central square, offering everything from homemade jams to hand-carved walking sticks. Children darted between hay bales and cornstalk decorations, while a local bluegrass band played from the gazebo. The festival had expanded this year to include the old Miller property at the edge of town, where the limestone caverns drew tourists curious about the town's mining history. Eleanor Blackwood arranged her display of honey jars and beeswax candles, occasionally glancing at her watch. At 63, she no longer moved with the agility that had once made her the region's most respected cave rescue volunteer, but her eyes remained sharp and observant. She noticed the small boy weaving through the crowd, clearly searching for something or someone. "You looking for trouble, young man?" she called as Ethan passed her booth for the 3rd time. He froze, tensing like a wild animal caught in headlights. Eleanor smiled, softening her weathered face. "Relax. I'm just wondering if you're hunting for someone in particular. You seem mighty focused." "No, ma'am," Ethan replied automatically, the response of a child accustomed to adult suspicion. "Mm-hmm." Eleanor's eyes crinkled. Wouldn't happen to be looking for a certain German shepherd, would you, big fellow? Bad leg. Ethan's surprise betrayed him. You've seen him, about 20 minutes ago, skulking around the back of the food trucks. She leaned closer, lowering her voice. Animal control's here too. Truck parked by the information booth. Alarm flashed across Ethan's face. If I were looking for that dog, Eleanor continued casually, I might try over by the old Miller well. Not many people head that way anymore. Too many safety concerns. Thank you, ma'am, Ethan said, already backing away. Be careful out there, she called after him. That well's been an accident waiting to happen for years. Town council's been arguing about who should pay to seal it up since before you were born. Ethan nodded and disappeared into the crowd, unaware that Eleanor Blackwood's warning contained more foresight than either could have imagined. At the festival's information booth, old Pete Jenkins held court, his leathery face animated as he regaled visitors with tales of Pinewood Creek's colorful past. Sheriff Thompson stood nearby, thumbs hooked in his belt loops, only half listening to Pete's familiar stories. And that old Miller well, Pete was saying to a couple from Tucson, goes down nearly 60 feet. Dug by hand in 1887 it was. Ain't been used since the town got proper water lines in 62. Then why hasn't it been filled in? The tourist asked. Budget cuts. Sheriff Thompson interjected with a snort. Miller property's technically outside town limits. County says it's the town's responsibility. Town says it's the county's. Meanwhile, they string up some caution tape every year and call it good enough. Should have been properly sealed after what happened to the Carter boy back in '05, Pete added solemnly. Fell in while playing hide and seek. Broke both legs. Lucky someone heard him calling for help. Sheriff Thompson shook his head. They finally approved the budget to seal it next month. Meanwhile, we've got fresh caution tape and a new cover over the opening. The well sat beneath a massive oak tree, its trunk twisted and gnarled with age. Yellow caution tape circled the area, though several sections had come loose and now fluttered uselessly in the autumn breeze. The wooden cover, recently placed over the well's stone opening, was sturdy enough but not secured to the ground. Ethan ducked under the drooping caution tape, scanning the area for Maverick. This far from the festival's center, the sounds of music and chatter faded, replaced by the gentle rustling of oak leaves. Maverick, he called softly, you out here, boy. A low whine answered him from behind the massive tree trunk. The German shepherd emerged cautiously, his amber eyes alert for danger. Relief flooded through Ethan as he crouched down, pulling the now cold hot dogs from his pocket. I've been looking everywhere for you, he said, offering the food. Animal control is here. You need to hide. Maverick accepted the hot dogs more delicately than his hunger might suggest, evidence of his careful training. While he ate, Ethan noticed fresh scratches on the dog's muzzle. Did somebody hurt you? He asked, reaching to examine them. Maverick jerked away, suddenly alert, his ears pricked forward, head turning toward the festival. Ethan heard it a moment later. Voices approaching, one of them unmistakably belonging to Animal Control Officer Davis. Been reports of a large stray in this area, Davis was saying. German shepherd, potentially dangerous. That's the old Thompson rescue dog, came another voice. My sister works for Carson City Animal Services. Says he escaped during transport months ago. Department wrote him off as dead. Well, "He'll be dead for real if I find him," Davis replied. "Can't have an unstable animal around all these kids." Panic seized Ethan. He grabbed Maverick's ruff, trying to pull him deeper into the woods. "Come on," he whispered urgently. "We gotta hide." But Maverick resisted, his attention fixed on something else entirely. A squirrel darted across the clearing, and with predatory instinct the dog lunged. Ethan, still gripping his fur, was pulled off balance. He stumbled backward, arms windmilling directly onto the wooden well cover. The sound of splintering wood seemed impossibly loud in the quiet clearing. For one suspended moment, Ethan felt nothing beneath his feet, just empty air and the nauseating sensation of falling. His scream died in his throat as shock stole his breath. The last thing he saw was Maverick's face at the edge of the well. Amber eyes wide with what looked remarkably like human comprehension. Then darkness engulfed him, the walls of the well rushing past in a vertigo-inducing blur. The impact knocked the remaining air from his lungs, a shockingly cold plunge into stagnant water that reached his chest as he sat, dazed, in the muddy bottom. 50 feet above, Maverick stood at the well's edge, his training and instinct at war. His former handler had drilled the protocol relentlessly, bark to alert. Stay in position. Never endanger yourself unnecessarily. A rescue dog's value was in finding victims, not becoming one. But this was Ethan, the only human who had shown him kindness since his injury, the only one who looked at his damaged leg and still saw worth. The voices were closer now, adult humans who could help. The rational choice was clear. Instead, Maverick backed up several paces, calculating the narrow opening with the precision that had once made him legendary among rescue dogs. His injured leg throbbed with remembered pain, the titanium plate a constant reminder of his limitations. The department had deemed him useless for precisely this reason. He could no longer jump, climb, or navigate unstable terrain. They were right. He wasn't the dog he once was. But Ethan was down there, alone and afraid. Maverick launched himself into the darkness, his powerful body twisting to fit through the opening. The fall was controlled chaos claws scrabbling against stone walls, his good legs absorbing impact where possible, the injured one held awkwardly aside. Each collision sent shards of agony through his frame, reopening barely healed wounds. The splash when he hit the water was insignificant compared to the pain that followed. But through the haze of it, he registered Ethan's shocked expression, the boy's lips already blue from the cold water. "Maverick," Ethan gasped. "You jumped in too. Why didn't you go get help?" The German shepherd limped through the shallow water, nosing the boy to check for injuries, finding no immediate threat to life. He positioned himself against the slick wall, offering his body as support to keep Ethan further from the water. Above them, the circle of sky seemed impossibly distant. Maverick threw his head back and began to bark. The water in the Miller well was numbingly cold despite the warm September day above. Ethan shivered uncontrollably as he clung to Maverick, the dog's body heat providing minimal comfort against the chill. The walls around them were slick with moss and age, any handholds worn smooth by nearly a century and a half of exposure to the elements. "We're stuck," Ethan whispered, his voice echoing strangely in the confined space. "Really stuck," Maverick whined softly, shifting his weight to better support the boy. The movement sent a visible ripple of pain through the dog's powerful frame, his injured leg trembling with the effort of standing in the uneven, muddy bottom of the well. "Your leg's hurting," Ethan said, trying to ease his weight off the dog. "You don't have to," Maverick growled, not aggressively but insistently, forcing himself back under Ethan. The message was clear: he would not allow the boy to stand in the water if he could prevent it. Looking up at the distant circle of sky, Ethan felt tears welling. "I'm sorry I got us into this," he whispered. "Now we're both gonna—" The thought was too frightening to complete. Instead, he buried his face in Maverick's damp fur, drawing comfort from the dog's steady heartbeat. His own heart raced with cold and fear, his mind tumbling through increasingly desperate scenarios. No one knew where he was. Mrs. Winters probably hadn't even noticed he was missing yet. By the time anyone thought to search for him, it might be too late. The water seemed to be rising, ever so slowly, or was that his imagination? Maverick barked again, the sound bouncing off the stone walls with painful intensity in the enclosed space. He paused, listened, then resumed a rhythmic pattern that Ethan gradually recognized as trained behavior. 3 short barks. Pause. 3 short barks. "Good boy," Ethan encouraged, his teeth chattering. "Keep going. Maybe somebody will hear you." As if understanding, Maverick continued his disciplined signaling, conserving energy between bouts of barking. His eyes remained fixed upward, ears swiveling to catch any response from above. Margaret Winters realized Ethan was missing approximately 27 minutes after he slipped away from her pie display. Her initial irritation quickly blossomed into concern as she scanned the fairgrounds, finding no sign of the quiet 7-year-old. "Have you seen Ethan?" she asked her husband, who was watching the twins attempt to toss beanbags through a wooden target. Henry Winters frowned. "Thought he was with you." "He was, but—" Margaret pressed her lips together. "He's probably just exploring. You know how boys are." But she didn't know. Not really. After 15 years as foster parents, she and Henry had cared for dozens of children, but none had stayed long enough for them to truly understand what made them tick. They were too old for permanent placements. The agency had decided years ago. Temporary caregivers only. "I'll check the food trucks," Henry offered, reading the worry in his wife's face. "He's probably loading up on junk before dinner." As they separated to search, Margaret found herself recalling Ethan's expression that morning, the carefully blank look that hadn't quite masked his hurt when she'd mentioned the Petersons' visit. She'd told herself the move was for the best. The boy needed a proper family, not 2 aging caregivers counting down to retirement. Now, threading through the festival crowds calling his name, she wondered if she'd been lying to herself all along. Animal Control Officer Davis and his companion had just reached the clearing when they heard the distinctive crack of splintering wood. They quickened their pace, rounding the massive oak tree in time to see the last of the wooden well cover disappearing into the dark opening. "What the hell?" Davis started, then froze as a large German shepherd appeared at the well's edge, staring down into the darkness. "That's it! That's the stray!" his companion exclaimed. The dog looked back at them briefly, and Davis would later swear he saw something unnervingly human in its gaze calculation, decision-making. Before either man could react, the shepherd backed up several paces, then launched itself directly into the well opening. "Jesus Christ!" Davis rushed forward, dropping to his knees at the well's edge. Did that dog just commit suicide? His flashlight beam penetrated perhaps 15 feet of the shaft before the darkness swallowed it. From far below came the faint sound of splashing, then barking 3 short barks, repeated with mechanical precision. "That's a train distress signal," Davis' companion said. His voice hushed with sudden understanding. "Search and rescue pattern." "But why would it jump?" Davis began, then paled as the truth dawned. "Oh, God. Something fell down there first. Maybe someone—" He keyed his radio with shaking fingers. "Control, this is Davis. We've got a situation at the old Miller Well. I need Sheriff Thompson and emergency services. Possible person down the well. Repeat, possible person down the well." Within 20 minutes, the once quiet clearing had transformed into a hub of frantic activity. Sheriff Thompson established a perimeter, pushing back the growing crowd of curious festival goers. 2 deputies carefully removed what remained of the broken well cover, revealing the dark shaft beneath. "Fire department's on the way from Carson City," Deputy Martinez reported. "ETA 18 minutes. Sheriff Thompson nodded grimly, playing his powerful flashlight down the well. "Any confirmation on who might be down there?" "We've got 3 reports of missing children," Martinez replied. 2 teenagers who were supposed to meet their parents an hour ago, and a 7-year-old foster kid staying with the Winters family. Ethan, Sheriff Thompson's brow furrowed. Quiet little guy. Kind of small for his age. Martinez nodded. "Mrs. Winters is frantic. Says he wandered off from her pie display." The sheriff's expression darkened. He'd seen too many accidents at the old well over the years, had advocated for properly sealing it for more than a decade. Budget constraints and jurisdictional disputes had created this nightmare. "Hello down there," he called into the shaft, his voice booming in the enclosed space. "This is Sheriff Thompson. Can anyone hear me?" The barking, which had been steadily continuing, paused briefly. Then a small, wavering voice called back, "Help! Please help! I'm down here with my dog." A murmur ran through the assembled crowd. Sheriff Thompson felt a momentary relief the child was conscious and communicative, followed immediately by renewed concern. The old well was notorious for its depth and the seasonal spring that could cause water levels to rise unpredictably. "Hang on, son," he shouted. "We've got help coming. Are you hurt?" "I'm really cold." The voice sounded younger now, frightened. "And the water's getting higher. Maverick's holding me up, but his leg is bleeding." "Maverick!" The name struck a chord of recognition. Sheriff Thompson turned to Davis. "Isn't that—" "My brother's old dog," Davis confirmed, his face pale. "From the search and rescue team. Brian surrendered him months ago after he was injured." Eleanor Blackwood pushed her way through the crowd, her weathered face taut with concern. "I saw the boy earlier," she said. "He was looking for that dog. I told him it might be over here." Her voice cracked. "This is my fault." Sheriff Thompson shook his head. "This is nobody's fault but the county commissioners who've been sitting on the well closure budget for years." He turned back to the well. "We're going to get you both out." "Son, what's your name?" "Ethan Miller," came the faint reply. "Please hurry. Maverick's hurt, real bad," as if to confirm this assessment. The barking resumed, but noticeably weaker than before. "We need to get someone down there now," Thompson decided. "That water's spring-fed. If it's rising—" "Fire department's still 15 minutes out," Martinez reminded him. "I can do it," Eleanor volunteered. I was with Cave Rescue for 20 years. Still have my gear in my truck. If you've got a solid anchor point, I can be down there in 5 minutes." Sheriff Thompson studied her, a woman in her 60s, with arthritis evident in her gnarled hands. But her eyes were clear and determined, and they didn't have the luxury of waiting. "Get your gear." He nodded. "Martinez, find something to use as an anchor, and somebody get some blankets and first aid supplies ready." As the crowd parted to let Eleanor through, a murmur rippled from the festival direction. A news van had arrived, and behind it, a police cruiser from neighboring Carson City. From the cruiser emerged a tall man in uniform, his captain's bars catching the afternoon sun. "That's Brian Thompson," someone whispered. "Sheriff's brother, the one who abandoned that dog down there, in the frigid darkness of the well." Ethan tried to keep his body from shaking as he balanced carefully on Maverick's braced form. The water had definitely risen. It now reached the dog's chest when standing on all fours. For the past hour, Maverick had maintained an awkward position against the wall. 3 legs braced, his injured front leg extended to create a platform that kept Ethan partly out of the water. "They're coming," Ethan assured the dog, stroking his head. "You heard them. They're going to get us out." Maverick's eyes were dulled with pain, but he maintained his position with stubborn determination. Blood seeped steadily from his reopened surgical wound, the metallic scent mingling with the musty dampness of the well. "You're the bravest dog ever," Ethan whispered. "I wish you could tell me about all the people you saved before. Bet there were lots of them." The cold had numbed Ethan's extremities, making his fingers clumsy as he tried to check Maverick's wound. The dog winced, but didn't snap when Ethan's probing fingers found the jagged tear where his impact with the well wall had ripped open the old surgical site. "Sorry," Ethan murmured. "Just wanted to see how bad it is." It was bad, even in the dim light filtering from above. Ethan could see the angry red flesh and the glint of what must be the metal plate the Winters had mentioned. The injury that had made Maverick useless to his former handler. A wave of fierce protectiveness washed over Ethan. "When we get out of here," he promised, "I won't let them take you away, no matter what Mrs. Winters says. You're coming home with me." Maverick's tail moved weakly in the water, the barest acknowledgement. As the minutes crawled by, Ethan found himself talking continuously to keep his mind off the cold and fear. He told Maverick about his parents' disappearance, about the 4 foster homes before the Winters, about his secret hope that someday someone would want to keep him. "I don't really remember my mom and dad anymore," he admitted. "Just little things, like how my dad smelled like cinnamon gum and my mom always sang in the shower. The police said they probably got lost hiking and, you know," he couldn't bring himself to say the word died out loud. "But sometimes I think maybe they're still out there. Maybe they're looking for me. But they just can't find me because I keep moving to different houses." Maverick listened with the perfect attention only animals can give. His amber eyes fixed on Ethan's face despite his obvious pain. "You got left behind too," Ethan continued. "But I found you. And maybe someday—" He trailed off as a shadow blocked the circle of light above. "Ethan," called a woman's voice. "My name's Eleanor Blackwood. I'm coming down to get you. Honey." A figure appeared in the opening, silhouetted against the sky, then began descending slowly on a rope. Ethan had never seen anything so wonderful in his life. Above ground, The scene had transformed into controlled chaos. Emergency vehicles lined the perimeter of the clearing, their lights flashing silently. A fire truck from Carson City had finally arrived, and professional rescue personnel were conferring with Sheriff Thompson and Eleanor's team, who had already begun the rescue operation. Among the gathered officials stood Captain Brian Miller, his face carefully composed in a professional mask that did little to hide his discomfort. He had been halfway through a press conference about his department's new K-9 training facility when the call came through. A child down a well with a dog. Not just any dog, Maverick. He'd driven to Pinewood Creek with a knot in his stomach, telling himself he was responding as a professional, not out of guilt, because there was nothing to feel guilty about. The department had made the decision to retire Maverick after his injury. He'd simply followed protocol. Now, watching Eleanor Blackwood disappear into the well, her silver hair gleaming briefly in the sunlight before the darkness swallowed her, Miller found his carefully constructed justifications crumbling. "Captain Miller," Sheriff Thompson acknowledged stiffly as he approached. The brothers had never been close, their relationship further strained by Brian's decision regarding Maverick. "Didn't expect to see you here." "Heard one of our former K-9s was involved," Miller replied, his tone professionally neutral. "Thought I might be of assistance." Sheriff Thompson's eyes narrowed slightly. "Funny. You weren't too concerned about Maverick's welfare when you dumped him at the shelter." A flush crept up Miller's neck. "That was a departmental decision. The dog couldn't perform his duties anymore." "The dog has a name," came a sharp voice from behind them. Margaret Winters stepped forward, her normally gentle face hardened with anger. "And he's down there right now keeping my foster son alive while you stand here making excuses." Captain Miller straightened, his professional demeanor slipping. "Ma'am, you don't understand the protocols involved in—" "I understand loyalty," Mrs. Winters cut him off. "That dog you threw away like garbage has been holding my boy above water for over an hour, with the same leg you decided made him worthless." The crowd that had gathered murmured in agreement, hostile eyes turning toward Captain Miller. A news reporter edged closer, her cameraman capturing the confrontation. Before Miller could respond, a shout came from the rescue team at the well's edge. "We've got contact. Eleanor's reached them." All attention immediately shifted to the rescue operation, where a firefighter with a headset was relaying information from Eleanor's radio. Both conscious, boys hypothermic but alert, dogs in rough shape, bleeding heavily from right front leg. Water's up to the dog's chest and rising steadily. "How long to extract?" Sheriff Thompson asked. The firefighter consulted with his team. "We can have the boy up in 10 minutes. The dog's more complicated. We'll need a special harness for an animal that size, especially if it's injured." "And how long will that take?" Mrs. Winters demanded. A hesitation. 30 minutes, minimum, maybe longer." "The water's rising an inch every 7 minutes," another rescuer reported. "At that rate—" He didn't need to finish. Everyone understood the grim mathematics. By the time they could get the proper equipment for Maverick, the water would likely be too high. Captain Miller stepped forward. "I have Maverick's old rescue harness in my cruiser," he said quietly. "It's designed for helicopter extraction. It might work." Sheriff Thompson gave his brother a long look, then nodded. "Get it." As Captain Miller jogged toward his vehicle, Mrs. Winters turned to her husband, who had appeared at her side with the twins. "If that dog dies saving our boy," she said in a low voice, "I will never forgive myself for trying to keep them apart." Henry squeezed her hand. "Let's not borrow trouble. Margaret, one crisis at a time." Eleanor Blackwood had seen many frightening things during her years with cave rescue, but the scene at the bottom of the Miller well would haunt her for the rest of her life. The beam of her helmet light revealed a small boy, lips blue with cold, balanced precariously on the outstretched leg of a large German shepherd. The dog was clearly in agony, trembling with the effort of maintaining his position against the slick wall. Yet his eyes remained alert and focused on the child. "Hey there," Eleanor said softly, touching down in the water beside them. It was shockingly cold, even through her wetsuit. "You must be Ethan." The boy nodded, his teeth chattering too hard for speech. "And this hero must be Maverick." She reached out slowly, allowing the dog to sniff her hand. Maverick gave a weak thump of his tail in acknowledgement. "We're going to get you both out of here." She quickly assessed the situation. The water was rising faster than anticipated, already reaching mid-chest on the dog. Ethan showed clear signs of hypothermia, but no obvious injuries. Maverick's condition was far more concerning. The reopened wound on his front leg pumped blood with each heartbeat, turning the water around them a diluted red. "I'm going to put this harness on you first, Ethan," she explained, unclipping the child-sized rescue harness from her belt. "Then we'll get you up top where it's warm and dry. After that, we'll come back for Maverick." "Okay." Ethan shook his head vehemently. "No," he managed through chattering teeth. Maverick first. He's hurt worse." Eleanor had expected this. In her experience, children bonded with animals often showed this kind of fierce protectiveness. "Sweetheart, we have to get you up first. That's the protocol." Don't care," Ethan insisted, wrapping his arms around the dog's neck. "He jumped in to save me. Won't leave him." Eleanor keyed her radio. "I've reached them. Boy's hypothermic but stable. Dog's critical major blood loss from right front leg. Water rising faster than expected." She hesitated, then added, "Boy refusing extraction unless dog goes first." There was a pause before Sheriff Thompson's voice crackled back. "Miller's got the dog's old harness. We're lowering it now. But Eleanor, if you need to overrule the kid—" "I understand," she replied, though she wasn't sure she could physically separate Ethan from Maverick if it came to that. A canvas bag descended on a separate line, containing a complex harness clearly designed for a large dog. Eleanor recognized it immediately as military-grade K9 equipment, far superior to anything they had on hand. "Look, Ethan," she said, "they've sent down Maverick's special harness. We're going to get him ready while they prepare for you up top. But I need you to let go of him so I can put this on properly." Reluctantly, Ethan released his grip on Maverick's neck, shivering violently as he was forced to stand in the water without the dog's support. Eleanor worked quickly, her experienced hands fitting the familiar harness around Maverick's chest and hindquarters. The dog remained perfectly still, clearly recognizing the equipment from his training. "Good boy," she murmured. "Such a good, brave boy." When the harness was secure, Eleanor radioed up, "Dog ready for extraction. Be advised, he's weak from blood loss. Minimal resistance expected." "Copy that," came the reply. "Beginning extraction now." The line attached to Maverick's harness slowly tightened. The dog whined softly as he was lifted from the water, his injured leg hanging limply. Ethan reached up to touch his paw one last time. "See you up to top, Maverick," he whispered. Good boy." Eleanor quickly fitted Ethan with the second harness, wrapping an emergency thermal blanket around his shoulders. "Your turn next, brave one." Just a few more minutes. Above them, a cheer erupted as Maverick's form emerged from the well, gently guided by rescue personnel. The sound echoed down the shaft, bringing a weak smile to Ethan's blue-tinged lips. "They're happy. He's safe," the boy murmured. Eleanor nodded, though she suspected the cheer was as much for the remarkable story unfolding before their eyes as for the dog himself. A story that was already being captured by news cameras and would soon spread far beyond Pinewood Creek. The story of a useless dog who had proven his worth beyond any doubt. Maverick emerged from the darkness into blinding sunshine, his body limp within the familiar confines of his rescue harness. Hands reached for him, gentle but urgent, easing him onto a blue tarp spread near the well's edge. The German shepherd blinked sluggishly, disoriented by pain and blood loss, his usual alertness dulled to a foggy awareness. "Jesus Christ," someone murmured. "Look at his leg." A woman in a Carson City Fire Department uniform knelt beside him, her practiced hands already assessing his injuries. "Severe laceration with arterial bleeding," she reported. "Looks like an old surgical site reopened. I can see the hardware." She glanced up at the circle of concerned faces. "We need a veterinarian. Now." Sheriff Thompson was already on his radio. "Dispatch. I need Dr. Samuelson from Valley Veterinary. Emergency response to the Miller Well site. K-9 officer down with severe trauma." "K-9 officer," someone questioned. "Damn right," the sheriff replied without hesitation. "He's earned it back today." As the veterinarian was summoned, the rescue team refocused on extracting Ethan. Eleanor's voice crackled over the radio, confirming the boy was secured and ready for ascent. Captain Miller positioned himself at the edge of the well, his face a mask of professional concentration as he helped guide the operations. The crowd held a collective breath as the small figure began his journey upward, Eleanor ascending on a separate line beside him. Margaret Winters pressed her hands to her mouth, tears flowing freely down her weathered cheeks. Beside her, the twins watched wide-eyed, for once subdued by the gravity of the situation, while attention focused on Ethan's rescue. Dr. Samuelson arrived, medical bag in hand. The veterinarian, a no-nonsense woman in her 50s, took one look at Maverick and snapped into action. "I need space and light," she ordered, kneeling beside the dog. "Someone hold this IV bag. He's in hypovolemic shock from blood loss." Captain Miller stepped forward. "I'll help," he said quietly. "I know his medical history." Dr. Samuelson's eyes flicked up, recognition and something harder flashing across her face. "Captain Miller, how unexpected to see you here." The rebuke was subtle but clear. She had been the one to examine Maverick after his initial injury, the one who had recommended rehabilitation rather than surrender. Her recommendation had been overruled. Without further comment, she thrust the IV bag into his hands and returned her attention to Maverick's wounded leg. The dog's eyes followed her movements. A faint thump of his tail indicating recognition. "I'm here, old friend," she murmured. "Just like always. We'll fix you up." Blood-soaked gauze accumulated beside her as she worked to control the bleeding, her experienced fingers probing the reopened wound. "The plates shifted," she reported clinically. "Tore through the surrounding tissue during the fall. He's pulled 2 screws completely loose." Captain Miller winced, his face paling as he held the IV bag higher. "Will he began, then stopped, unable to finish the question. "Dr. Samuelson didn't look up. He'll need surgery, again. But if we can control this bleeding and get him to my clinic within the hour, his prognosis is good." She paused, then added with pointed emphasis, "He's always been a fighter. Some animals give up when they're abandoned. Not this one." Before Miller could respond, a cheer erupted from the rescue team. Ethan's head had appeared at the well's opening, Eleanor right behind him. Hands reached down to guide them both to safety. Blankets immediately wrapped around the shivering boy. "Maverick," was Ethan's first word, his voice thin and tremulous with cold. "Where's Maverick?" "He's right here, son," Sheriff Thompson assured him, guiding the boy toward where Dr. Samuelson worked. "The doctor's taking good care of him." Ethan stumbled forward on numb legs, dropping to his knees beside the German Shepherd, despite the paramedics' attempts to steer him toward the waiting ambulance. "Maverick," he whispered, reaching out a trembling hand. The dog's tail thumped weakly against the tarp. With visible effort, Maverick lifted his head, stretching to lick Ethan's fingers once before collapsing back in exhaustion. "He saved me," Ethan told the circle of adults, his voice stronger with urgency. "He held me up for hours so I wouldn't drown, even though his leg was bleeding really bad." Margaret Winters pushed through the crowd, dropping to her knees beside Ethan. "Oh, thank God," she breathed, pulling him into a fierce embrace. "We were so worried. Don't you ever disappear like that again. You hear me?" Ethan stiffened briefly in surprise. Mrs. Winters had never been demonstrative with her affection, then melted into the hug, his small body shaking with delayed shock and emotion. "I'm sorry," he whispered against her shoulder. "I just wanted to find Maverick before animal control did." Henry Winters joined them, his weathered hand coming to rest on Ethan's wet hair. "You found him all right?" he said gruffly. "Nearly got yourself killed in the process." "Sir, ma'am," a paramedic interrupted. "We really need to get the boy to the hospital. He's showing moderate hypothermia and potential shock." "The dog has to come too," Ethan insisted, pulling back from Mrs. Winters' embrace. "Please, I won't go without him." Dr. Samuelson looked up from her work, meeting Mrs. Winters' eyes over Ethan's head. "The dog needs immediate surgery," she said. "My clinic is 3 blocks from the hospital. I can have my assistant meet us there with equipment." Mrs. Winters nodded without hesitation. "Then that's where we're going. All of us." "Ma'am," the paramedic began to protest. "All of us," she repeated firmly. Preparations were made swiftly. Maverick was carefully transferred to a backboard, his bandaged leg immobilized, IV still running. Captain Miller helped load him into Dr. Samuelson's SUV, then stepped back, his uniform streaked with the dog's blood, as the caravan of vehicles prepared to depart. Ambulance, veterinary SUV, and the Winters sedan. Miller approached Sheriff Thompson. "I should come," he said quietly. "File the report. Document the rescue. It's protocol." His brother gave him a long, measuring look. "Protocol," he repeated flatly. Like surrendering an injured canine officer was protocol. Miller flinched. "I made a mistake. Tom, did you—" Sheriff Thompson jerked his chin toward the departing vehicles. "Tell that to the boy who almost died today. Tell that to the dog who jumped down a 50-foot well on 3 good legs because his sense of duty outweighed his training." He turned away. "File your report from Carson City. Brian, we'll handle things here." Left alone at the scene, Captain Miller watched the emergency vehicles disappear toward town, their lights flashing silently in the late afternoon sun. Around him, the crowd was dispersing, though several news crews remained, their cameras capturing the aftermath of the dramatic rescue. One reporter approached, microphone extended. "Captain Miller, is it true that the dog who saved the boy today was your former canine partner, the same dog you surrendered to a shelter after his injury?" Miller stared at her. The carefully constructed narrative he'd maintained for months, crumbling under the weight of the day's events. He opened his mouth to deliver the standard department response about protocols and difficult decisions, but what emerged instead was the truth he'd been avoiding. "Yes," he said simply, "and I was wrong to do it." The Pinewood Creek Medical Center was a modest facility with only 20 beds, but what it lacked in size it made up for in community spirit. By the time Ethan arrived, the entire staff had been briefed on the situation and prepared accordingly. Dr. Lena Hoffman, the hospital's chief pediatrician, met them at the emergency entrance. "You must be our well explorer," she said warmly as Ethan was wheeled in. "I hear you had quite an adventure today." Ethan, wrapped in heated blankets, looked past her anxiously. "Where are they taking Maverick?" "Your dog is going straight to surgery with Dr. Samuelson." Dr. Hoffman explained, walking alongside the gurney. "She's the best veterinary surgeon in 3 counties. He's in good hands." "He's not actually our dog," Mrs. Winters clarified from behind them. "He's a stray that Ethan befriended." "He's my dog," Ethan insisted with unexpected firmness. "And I'm his person." Dr. Hoffman exchanged a look with Mrs. Winters over Ethan's head, the determined declaration of a child who had already made up his mind. "Well, let's get you warmed up and checked out, and then we'll see about your friend's progress." The next hour passed in a blur of medical procedures. Ethan's core temperature was dangerously low, requiring active warming measures. X-rays revealed no broken bones from his fall, though extensive bruising would leave him sore for weeks. Through it all, he asked repeatedly about Maverick, refusing to settle until Dr. Hoffman promised to get updates from the veterinary team. In the adjacent building that housed Dr. Samuelson's clinic, a different battle was being waged. Maverick's injuries were severe. The fall had not only reopened his surgical wound, but also damaged the previous repairs. The titanium plate had shifted, tearing through muscle tissue and severing a minor artery. "BP dropping," Dr. Samuelson's assistant reported. "He's not stabilizing. Increase the fluids and prepare another unit of blood," Samuelson ordered, her gloved hands working steadily inside the wound. "This dog is not dying on my table today," For nearly 2 hours, they fought to repair the damage, replacing the compromised hardware with a new plate, meticulously reconnecting torn muscle and ligaments. Throughout the procedure, Dr. Samuelson maintained a running commentary to her patient. "You just had to be a hero again, didn't you, Maverick?" she murmured as she worked. "Couldn't settle for a quiet retirement. Had to prove them all wrong." By the time she closed the final suture, evening had fallen outside the clinic windows. Exhausted, Dr. Samuelson stripped off her surgical gloves and gown, then went to find the Winters family. She found them in Ethan's hospital room, where the boy was now conscious and alert, though still wrapped in warming blankets. His face lit up when she entered, then fell as he registered her grave expression. "Is Maverick—" He couldn't finish the question. "He's alive?" she assured him quickly. "The surgery was complicated, but successful. We've repaired the damage to his leg and stopped the bleeding." The collective relief in the room was palpable. Mrs. Winters sagged into a chair, while Henry placed a steadying hand on her shoulder. "However," Dr. Samuelson continued carefully, "he's lost a significant amount of blood. The next 24 hours will be critical. We're monitoring him closely." "Can I see him?" Ethan asked immediately. Dr. Hoffman, who had entered behind Dr. Samuelson, shook her head. "Not tonight. Ethan, you need rest, and so does Maverick. Tomorrow, if you're both stable, we'll see about arranging a visit." "But he'll be scared," Ethan protested. "He doesn't know where he is. He needs me." The two doctors exchanged glances, recognizing the therapeutic benefits such a reunion might provide to both patients, weighed against the medical risks. "Tell you what," Dr. Samuelson suggested, "I can bring you something of Maverick's, his blanket perhaps, so you have his scent nearby. And tomorrow morning, first thing, if Dr. Hoffman approves, we'll wheel you over to see him." Ethan considered this compromise, then nodded reluctantly. "Promise." "Promise." Both doctors replied in unison. As the medical professionals stepped out to confer in the hallway, Ethan turned to the Winters. The exhaustion of the day's events was finally catching up with him, his eyelids growing heavy despite his concern for Maverick. "You can't let them take him away," he murmured, fighting to stay awake. "Even if he gets better, he's not useless. He saved me." Margaret Winters smoothed his damp hair back from his forehead, an unexpectedly tender gesture. "No one's taking that dog anywhere," she said firmly. "Rest now. We'll figure everything out tomorrow." As Ethan drifted toward sleep, the last thing he heard was Henry Winters' gruff voice saying, "Reckon we might need to rethink some things. Margaret, about the boy, about the dog, about all of it." Dawn broke over Pinewood Creek with the soft pastels of early autumn, but inside the veterinary clinic adjacent to the medical center, time had blurred into a continuous emergency. Dr. Samuelson had remained through the night, monitoring Maverick's vital signs as the German Shepherd fought for his life. The surgery had been successful in a technical sense, the damaged hardware removed, a new plate installed, the wound meticulously closed, but the trauma and blood loss had pushed the dog's body to its limits. "Temps down again," Dr. Samuelson murmured to her assistant as she checked the monitors. 97.2. Pulse is weaker than I'd like." The assistant, a young woman who had been there when Maverick was first surrendered to the shelter, blinked back tears. "He was doing so well an hour ago. That's how it goes sometimes." Dr. Samuelson adjusted the IV drip, her movements gentle despite her exhaustion. Up and down, hour by hour. He's fighting. But, She didn't finish the sentence. They both knew the grim statistics for animals who experience this level of trauma and blood loss. The fact that Maverick had survived the surgery was already remarkable. Whether he would survive the next few hours remained an open question. Dr. Samuelson glanced at her watch. It's almost 7. The boy will be asking about him soon. Should I tell Dr. Hoffman to delay the visit? The assistant asked hesitantly. After a moment's consideration, Dr. Samuelson shook her head. No. If this is going to be goodbye, the boy deserves his chance. Her voice softened. And Maverick deserves to hear his person's voice one more time. Across the parking lot in the medical center, Ethan awoke disoriented, the unfamiliar hospital room momentarily confusing him. Then the events of the previous day rushed back the well. The cold water, Maverick's bleeding leg, the rescue. He sat up abruptly, wincing at the stiffness in his bruised body. "Maverick," he said aloud, his voice scratchy from sleep. "Easy there, partner." Henry Winters looked up from the chair where he'd spent the night, his weathered face creased with concern. "Doctor says you took quite a tumble. Need to move slow." Ethan ignored the advice, pushing himself upright. "I need to see Maverick. They promised." "And you will," Henry assured him, moving to help the boy back against his pillows. "But first, the doctor needs to check you over. Make sure you're healing up proper." As if summoned by his words, Dr. Hoffman entered, clipboard in hand. She smiled at Ethan, but there was a tightness around her eyes that he immediately recognized, the same expression Mrs. Winters had worn when telling him about his next placement with the Petersons. Adult concern, poorly disguised. "How's our brave explorer this morning?" Dr. Hoffman asked, her tone deliberately cheerful. "Where's Maverick?" Ethan demanded, ignoring the question. "Is he okay?" "They said I could see him this morning." Dr. Hoffman's smile faltered slightly. "Yes, about that." She pulled a chair close to Ethan's bed, sitting down to bring herself to his eye level. "Ethan, Dr. Samuelson has been with Maverick all night. He made it through surgery successfully, but he's still very weak." "But I can see him." "Right," Ethan persisted, his heart beginning to pound. "You promised." The doctor hesitated, glancing at Henry Winters. "Dr. Samuelson thinks it would be good for you to visit." "Yes, but I want to prepare you. Maverick is very sick. He's hooked up to machines that are helping him breathe and monitoring his heart. He may not be able to respond to you the way he normally would." Ethan absorbed this information, his young face solemn. "Is he dying?" The blunt question hung in the air for a moment. Dr. Hoffman chose her words carefully. "His condition is critical. Ethan, Dr. Samuelson and her team are doing everything they can, but yes, there is a possibility that Maverick might not recover." Tears welled in Ethan's eyes, but he blinked them back with fierce determination. "Then I need to see him right now. He can't go without me there." "All right," Dr. Hoffman nodded. "Let me do a quick examination, and then we'll take you over." The promised quick examination felt interminable to Ethan, who submitted to temperature checks and blood pressure measurements with barely concealed impatience. Every minute felt precious, stolen from the time he could be spending with Maverick, finally cleared. He was helped into a wheelchair. His legs were still weak from the cold and trauma, though he protested that he could walk. Henry Winters draped a blanket over his knees, and Dr. Hoffman began wheeling him toward the door. "Where's Mrs. Winters?" Ethan asked, suddenly realizing her absence. "Margaret's already at the clinic," Henry replied. "Went over at first light to check on things." Something in his tone made Ethan look up sharply, but the old man's face revealed nothing. The veterinary clinic occupied the eastern wing of the medical center complex, connected by a covered walkway. As they approached, Ethan could see a small crowd gathered outside locals bringing flowers, children with handmade cards, even a few news crews setting up cameras. "Word's gotten around," Henry murmured. "Whole town's pulling for your dog." The unexpected support brought a fresh lump to Ethan's throat. In all his young life, he'd rarely felt that anyone besides his parents had truly been in his corner. Now, an entire community had rallied not just for him, but for a stray dog most of them had previously feared or ignored. Inside the clinic, the atmosphere was hushed and tense. Dr. Samuelson met them in the reception area, her exhaustion evident in the dark circles beneath her eyes. "He's hanging in there," she told Ethan without preamble, correctly guessing his first question. "But I won't lie to you, he's very weak. The next few hours are critical." "Can I see him now?" Ethan asked, his voice small but steady. Dr. Samuelson nodded, motioning for Dr. Hoffman to follow with the wheelchair. "We've set up a special recovery area. Mrs. Winters is with him now." They moved through the clinic to a quiet room in the back. Through the observation window, Ethan could see Maverick lying on a padded table, surrounded by monitoring equipment. The German Shepherd's powerful frame looked diminished somehow, vulnerable beneath the bright medical lights. His injured leg was heavily bandaged and elevated on a support. Mrs. Winters sat beside him, one hand resting gently on his head. "Before we go in," Dr. Samuelson said, kneeling beside the wheelchair, "I want you to understand something. Maverick is heavily sedated to help manage his pain. He may not wake up or respond when you talk to him, but that doesn't mean he can't hear you. Dogs often can sense their people nearby, even when they seem unconscious." Ethan nodded, eyes fixed on Maverick's still form. "I understand. Also," she continued, "all these machines and tubes are helping him. Try not to touch them." "Okay, you can touch his head, his back, his good legs, but be very gentle." Another nod, more determined this time. Dr. Samuelson looked to Dr. Hoffman, who gave a small confirming gesture. Together, they wheeled Ethan into the recovery room. Mrs. Winters looked up as they entered, her eyes red-rimmed from tears or lack of sleep, perhaps both. She managed a weak smile for Ethan, then moved aside to make room for his wheelchair. "Hey, buddy," she said softly. "Someone's here to see you." Maverick remained motionless, his breathing shallow and labored despite the oxygen support. The monitoring equipment emitted steady, quiet beeps, tracking each heartbeat. "Maverick," Ethan whispered, reaching out a trembling hand to touch the dog's head. "It's me." It's Ethan." There was no response. No tail thump. No ear twitch. Not even a change in the rhythm of his breathing. The German shepherd lay perfectly still, as if already gone from this world. Tears spilled down Ethan's cheeks as he gently stroked Maverick's fur. "Please don't go," he whispered, his voice breaking. "Please. I need you." Behind him, the adults exchanged pained glances. Dr. Samuelson moved to check the monitors, her expression grim as she noted the weakening vital signs. "His heart rate's dropping," she murmured to Dr. Hoffman. "BP's falling too." Ethan, oblivious to their exchange, continued talking to Maverick, his words tumbling out in a desperate stream. "You're the bravest dog ever. You saved me. Now you gotta save yourself. Okay, we're gonna be together. I promise I'll take care of you forever if you just wake up." The monitors began to sound a quiet alarm. The steady alarm from the monitors pierced the hushed atmosphere of the recovery room. Dr. Samuelson moved swiftly, checking readings and adjusting equipment with practiced efficiency. "What's happening?" Ethan demanded, his small hand still resting on Maverick's head. "What's wrong with him? His heart rate is dropping." Dr. Samuelson explained, her tone gentle but urgent. "His body is struggling to maintain basic functions." Mrs. Winters placed her hands on Ethan's shoulders, preparing to pull him back if necessary. "Maybe we should step outside for a minute. Honey, let the doctor work." "No." Ethan's voice rose in panic. "I'm not leaving him." He leaned closer to Maverick, his tears falling onto the dog's fur. "Please, Maverick, please don't go. I love you." As the medical team worked frantically around them, the room's door swung open. Captain Brian Miller stood in the doorway, still in his uniform, though it was rumpled from what appeared to be a sleepless night. His face was haggard, eyes bloodshot. "I came as soon as I heard," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "How is he?" The unexpected arrival momentarily froze everyone in place. Dr. Samuelson recovered first, her expression hardening. "Critical," she said shortly, "and deteriorating. We're trying to stabilize him now." Captain Miller took a hesitant step into the room, his eyes fixed on Maverick's still form. May I see him?" "No." The single word came from Ethan, spoken with such vehemence that all the adults turned to stare at him. The boy's face was flushed with anger beneath his tears. "You left him. You threw him away. You don't get to be here now." Miller flinched as if struck. "Son, I know you're upset, but he's not your son." Mrs. Winters interjected firmly. "And he's right. This isn't the time." Before Miller could respond, the monitors emitted a different tone, higher, more urgent. "Dr. Samuelson cursed under her breath, reaching for a syringe. "Heart rate's bottoming out," she reported. "Blood pressure critical. We're losing him." "No," Ethan cried, clutching at Maverick's fur. "Maverick, please, I need you. Don't leave me." The raw desperation in the boy's voice seemed to penetrate the veil of unconsciousness surrounding the dog. Maverick's ear twitched once, then again. The movement was so slight that only Ethan, positioned closest to the dog's head, noticed it. "He moved," Ethan exclaimed. "His ear moved, Maverick. Can you hear me?" "It's Ethan. I'm right here." "Doctor," Samuelson glanced at the monitors. where the heartbeat line continued its dangerous descent. "Sometimes there are involuntary movements near the end," she said gently. "It doesn't necessarily mean—" She stopped abruptly as Maverick's eyelids fluttered. A collective gasp went through the room as the German shepherd's eyes opened halfway, unfocused but unmistakably conscious. "That's it, boy," Ethan encouraged, his voice thick with tears. "Come back. You can do it." The monitoring equipment continued its alarming beeps, but Dr. Samuelson's expression had shifted from resignation to cautious focus. "Talk to him," she instructed Ethan. "Keep talking. He's responding to your voice." Ethan needed no encouragement. Words poured from him in a desperate stream, memories of their brief time together, promises for the future. Simple declarations of love and need that cut through the clinical atmosphere of the recovery room and reached something essential in the dying dog. Slowly, impossibly, the monitors began to stabilize. The heartbeat line strengthened. Blood pressure readings inched upward. Maverick's eyes remained open, now fixed on Ethan's face with unmistakable recognition. "I don't believe it," Dr. Samuelson murmured, checking and rechecking the readings. "He's stabilizing on his own." "Is that normal?" Mrs. Winters asked, her voice hushed with awe. Dr. Samuelson shook her head. "There's nothing normal about any of this. Medically speaking, he shouldn't even be conscious with these readings." She watched as Maverick's tail moved weakly against the table, a deliberate gesture of recognition. "But then, medicine doesn't account for certain bonds." The crisis wasn't over. Maverick's condition remained critical, but the immediate danger had passed. As the medical team continued their work, the atmosphere in the room shifted from desperate grief to cautious hope. Captain Miller had remained frozen in the doorway throughout the dramatic turn of events. Now, watching the boy and dog together, something in his professional facade cracked completely. He stepped back into the hallway, out of sight of the others, and pressed a hand to his mouth to stifle a sound that might have been a sob. Sheriff Thompson found his brother there 10 minutes later, slumped against the wall, face buried in his hands. "Heard the dog pulled through," the sheriff said without preamble. "For now, at least." Miller looked up, his eyes red. He recognized the boy. He was practically gone. "Tom, the monitors were—" And then the kid started talking to him. And he just decided to stay, Sheriff Thompson finished. "Guess he found something worth fighting for." "I made a mistake," Miller said quietly. "When Maverick was injured, the department gave me options: rehabilitation, medical retirement, adoption. I could have kept him." He shook his head. "But the new K9 unit was being formed, and they promised me command if I had a fully operational dog. Maverick would have taken months to rehabilitate, with no guarantee he'd ever be field-ready again." "So you chose your career over your partner," Sheriff Thompson summarized bluntly. Miller didn't deny it. "I told myself it was protocol, that he was department property, not my personal pet, that he'd be happier with a family who could give him a proper retirement." He gave a bitter laugh. "Truth is, I saw him as damaged goods, a liability, useless to the department and to me. And now I see what real loyalty looks like," Miller replied, glancing toward the recovery room door. "That dog jumped down a 50-foot well on 3 good legs for a boy he'd known for what, a few weeks, while I discarded him after 6 years of partnership because he couldn't perform to department standards anymore." Sheriff Thompson studied his brother for a long moment. "Reckon there's a lesson in there somewhere." "Yeah," Miller agreed quietly. "Reckon there is." Inside the recovery room, a different conversation was unfolding. As Maverick's condition stabilized, Dr. Hoffman had insisted that Ethan return to his own room for rest. The boy had reluctantly agreed, only after extracting promises that he would be brought back the moment anything changed. Left alone with Mrs. Winters, Dr. Samuelson reviewed Maverick's latest readings. "He's not out of the woods," she cautioned. "But the fact that he's responsive and fighting is a very good sign. I've never seen anything quite like that turnaround." Mrs. Winters nodded, her gaze fixed on the sleeping German shepherd. "That boy has been through 4 foster homes in 3 years," she said quietly. "Never forms attachments, keeps to himself. Henry and I were planning to transition him to the Petersons next month, a younger couple better equipped for a permanent placement." Dr. Samuelson raised an eyebrow. "And now," Mrs. Winters sighed, reaching out to gently stroke Maverick's back. "Now I'm wondering if we've all been making the same mistake Captain Miller made with this dog, looking at what's broken instead of what still works." She turned to face the veterinarian fully. "I need to know something, doctor, and I need the absolute truth. After Maverick's original injury, was he really beyond rehabilitation? Or was that just a convenient assessment to justify getting rid of him, doctor?" Samuelson's expression tightened. "I treated Maverick after the Sullivan Building collapse. The damage was severe, multiple fractures, extensive soft tissue trauma. But with proper rehabilitation, I estimated a 70% recovery of function was possible. Not enough for full search and rescue duties, perhaps, but more than adequate for a normal, active life." She paused, choosing her next words carefully. "I made that recommendation to the department. It was overruled by Captain Miller." "By Captain Miller," Dr. Samuelson confirmed. "He requested euthanasia initially, citing department policy for injured canines. When I refused, he surrendered Maverick to the county shelter instead." Mrs. Winters absorbed this information, her weathered face hardening with each word. "And no one challenged this decision. No one fought for Maverick. I filed a formal protest," Dr. Samuelson replied, "but without a willing adopter with experience handling these dogs, my options were limited." She glanced toward the door where Captain Miller had appeared earlier. It's worth noting that shortly after surrendering Maverick, Miller received his promotion to K-9 Unit Commander, a position that required him to have a fully operational dog immediately, not one in rehabilitation. The implication was clear, and it hung in the air between them like a thundercloud. Mrs. Winters' mouth thinned to a hard line. "So he sacrificed a loyal partner for a promotion," she said flatly. "Labeled him useless to justify his own ambition." Dr. Samuelson neither confirmed nor denied this assessment. "What matters now is that Maverick has a second chance," she said instead. "If he pulls through this crisis, he'll need committed care during recovery. His leg will never be 100%, but with proper rehabilitation, he can have a good quality of life." She gave Mrs. Winters a searching look. "Do you know someone who might provide that Before Mrs. Winters could respond, a nurse hurried into the room. "Dr. Samuelson, there's a situation with the boy, Ethan. Dr. Hoffman asked if you could come right away." "What's wrong?" Mrs. Winters demanded, already moving toward the door. "His fever's spiked suddenly," the nurse explained. "They're concerned about infection from the well water. He's asking for Maverick." 6 months later, the Miller well no longer existed. The county had finally allocated funds not just to seal it, but to transform the entire clearing into a small park. A simple bronze plaque now stood where the well had once been, commemorating the rescue with understated eloquence. "Courage knows no limitations. In honor of Maverick and Ethan Miller, September 2023." On a warm spring afternoon, the park hosted its official opening ceremony. The entire town of Pinewood Creek seemed to have turned out for the occasion, along with media representatives from several surrounding counties. At the center of attention stood Ethan Miller, now 8 years old, looking both embarrassed and pleased by the fuss. Beside him, Maverick sat at perfect attention, his amber eyes surveying the crowd with calm dignity. The German shepherd's right front leg still bore the scars of his ordeal. Though healed, it remained noticeably stiffer than his other limbs, requiring a slight adjustment to his gait. But there was nothing in his alert posture or bright expression that suggested disability, only adaptation. "You ready for this, buddy?" Ethan whispered, scratching behind Maverick's ears. The dog responded with a soft whuff of acknowledgement, leaning briefly against the boy's leg in a gesture of solidarity. Mayor Jenkins stepped up to the podium, clearing his throat to signal the start of the ceremony. "Ladies and gentlemen, friends and neighbors, we gather today to celebrate not just the opening of a new community space, but the remarkable story that inspired it." His weathered face creased in a smile as he gestured toward Ethan and Maverick. A story about second chances, true courage, and the kind of loyalty we'd all be blessed to experience once in our lives. From their seats in the front row, Margaret and Henry Winters watched with barely concealed pride. The past 6 months had transformed them as much as it had Ethan and Maverick. The couple who had never intended to be permanent parents now sported matching gold bands on their left hands, matching the one on Ethan's small finger. The adoption had been finalized 3 months earlier, on Ethan's 8th birthday. "Figured we'd save on celebration costs," Henry had joked gruffly, though his eyes had shone suspiciously bright as he signed the papers making Ethan legally their son. The Petersons had been understanding about the change in plans. "Some things are just meant to be," Mrs. Peterson had said when Margaret called to explain. "That boy found his family 2-legged and 4-legged both." After the mayor's speech, Ethan was invited to cut the ceremonial ribbon. He insisted that Maverick help, carefully guiding the dog's paw to the oversized scissors alongside his own hand. The crowd erupted in applause as the ribbon fell away, officially opening the path to the new park. As people began to explore the space, Eleanor Blackwood approached the Winters family, her eyes crinkling at the corners as she smiled at Ethan. "Quite the celebration for our local heroes," she remarked. "How's Maverick's therapy work going?" The question referenced Maverick's new career. After months of rehabilitation guided by Dr. Samuelson's expertise and Ethan's unwavering encouragement, the German Shepherd had been certified as a therapy dog. 3 days a week, he and Ethan visited the children's ward at Carson City Hospital, bringing comfort to young patients facing their own battles. "Awesome," Ethan replied enthusiastically. "There's this kid, Jacob, who wouldn't talk to any of the doctors. But he talks to Maverick. Tells him all kinds of stuff. He puffed up with pride. The nurses say we're making a real difference. I don't doubt it for a minute, Eleanor said, her gaze shifting to include Maverick in the conversation. You two were meant for important work. As the conversation continued, Margaret Winters noticed a familiar figure hovering at the edge of the gathering. Captain Brian Miller stood apart from the crowd, watching the proceedings with an unreadable expression. He was in civilian clothes today, perhaps hoping to blend in, though his military bearing made him instantly recognizable. "Excuse me a moment," Margaret murmured to her husband, then made her way across the grass to where Miller stood. He straightened as she approached, clearly uncertain of his welcome. "Mrs. Winters, congratulations on the adoption. Ethan looks happy." "He is happy," she confirmed, "and so is Maverick." Miller nodded, his gaze returning to the dog and boy at the center of the celebration. "Dr. Samuelson tells me his rehabilitation has exceeded all expectations, that he's doing work just as meaningful as his search and rescue days. More meaningful, I'd say," Margaret replied. "He's healing hearts now, not just finding bodies." There was no mistaking the pointed edge to her words. Miller accepted it without flinching. "I deserved that," he acknowledged quietly. "I made a terrible mistake with Maverick, one I live with every day." Margaret studied him thoughtfully. Over the past months, she'd heard through the small-town grapevine about the changes in Captain Miller's life. He'd stepped down from his position as K-9 unit commander, requesting reassignment to regular patrol. More significantly, he'd become a vocal advocate for retired police dogs, establishing a foundation to support their medical care and placement. "I understand you've been doing good work yourself," she said finally. "Your foundation has already helped place several retired K-9s. A flush of color touched Miller's face. "It's the least I can do. Too little. Too late for Maverick. But perhaps not for others. It's never too late to learn from our mistakes." "Captain," Margaret's tone softened slightly, "though some take longer to forgive than others." Miller's gaze shifted back to Ethan and Maverick. "I don't expect forgiveness, Mrs. Winters. Especially not from them. I just wanted to see that they're okay. That something good came from my failure." Before Margaret could respond, Ethan spotted them talking. The boy whispered something to Maverick. Then both began making their way across the grass toward where she stood with Miller. The captain stiffened, clearly preparing himself for a difficult encounter. Ethan stopped a few feet away, his expression guarded but not hostile. Maverick, however, continued forward until he stood directly before his former handler. For a long moment, dog and man regarded each other in silence. Then, with deliberate calm, Maverick sat and extended his right paw, the injured one, in the formal greeting he'd been trained to offer years ago. Miller's breath caught audibly. With trembling fingers, he knelt and gently took the offered paw. "Hello, old friend," he whispered. "You look well." "He is well," Ethan said, stepping closer. "Dr. Samuelson says he's the strongest dog she's ever treated." "I believe it," Miller replied, carefully releasing Maverick's paw. "He always was exceptional." An awkward silence fell between them. broken finally by Ethan's straightforward question, "Do you still think he's useless?" Miller winced, but met the boy's gaze squarely. "No, Ethan, I was wrong about that. Terribly wrong. Maverick has more courage and heart than most humans I know, myself included." Ethan considered this, then nodded once. "He saved my life. He saved mine, too. Once," Miller admitted quietly. "During the Mesa earthquake, building coming down around us, and he guided me to safety before going back for others." He glanced down at Maverick, whose amber eyes remained fixed on his face. "I forgot that when it mattered most." Something in the captain's evident regret seemed to satisfy Ethan. "Maverick doesn't hold grudges," the boy said finally. "That's one of the best things about dogs. They forgive better than people do." With that simple wisdom, he turned and walked back toward the celebration, trusting that Maverick would follow. After a moment's hesitation, the German Shepherd did exactly that, limping slightly but moving with purpose as he rejoined his chosen person. As the afternoon sun slanted through the old oak tree, casting dappled shadows across the new park, old Pete Jenkins found himself seated beside Henry Winters on a freshly installed bench. "Never thought I'd see the day," Pete remarked, nodding toward where Ethan and Maverick were now playing with the twins, all four racing across the open grass with abandon. "You and Margaret taking on a permanent placement. At your age," Henry snorted. "Wasn't exactly planned." "Best things in life rarely are," Pete observed sagely. "Seems to me the boy and that dog were exactly what you two needed." Henry watched his wife laughing as Ethan demonstrated one of Maverick's new tricks, her face more relaxed and joyful than he'd seen in years. "Suppose you might be right about that." "Course I'm right," Pete insisted. "Been saying it for years, ain't nothing useless in this world except the folks who can't see the value in what's right in front of 'em." As if hearing his name in the old man's philosophy. Maverick looked up from his play, amber eyes gleaming in the afternoon light. For a creature once discarded as broken beyond repair, he moved with remarkable grace, his adaptation to three-legged running so seamless that the impairment was almost invisible. In that moment, watching boy and dog race toward an uncertain but undoubtedly shared future, Henry Winters found himself profoundly grateful for second chances and for wells deep enough to reach the hidden springs of compassion that flowed beneath Pinewood Creek's dusty surface. In the twilight of our lives, we often fear becoming what Captain Miller once called Maverick useless, discarded when our bodies can no longer perform as they once did. We worry about being a burden, about losing our purpose. But Maverick's story reminds us that our value never truly diminishes. It simply transforms. That German Shepherd, once celebrated for finding the lost, found his deepest meaning not in his peak physical prowess, but in the unwavering loyalty he showed a boy who needed him. Together, they proved that our scars and limitations don't define us. They simply redirect us toward our truest purpose. Margaret and Henry Winters discovered this truth as well, finding their most meaningful chapter not in well-earned retirement, but in opening their hearts to a boy who needed permanence. As we face our own challenges, aching joints,